Imports of goods into the United States plummeted in April 2025, registering the biggest monthly drop ever. The impressive 20% retreat was directly attributed to the new wave of protective tariffs implemented by President Donald Trump. This aggressive economic strategy has shaken the trade balance, destabilized relations with key partners, and generated strong reactions in global supply chains. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, this unprecedented contraction is a clear sign of the immediate impact of the tariff policies. Companies that had accelerated imports earlier in the year, trying to escape the new tariffs announced by Trump, are now drastically reducing their purchases from abroad. The consequences were visible in trade relations with economic powers such as Canada and China, whose exports to the United States fell to their lowest levels since 2021 and 2020 respectively. That collapse also helped halve the United States trade deficit in goods, a historic drop in a single month. According to the analysis by consultancy firm Oxford Economics, the April data confirms that the effect of the tariffs has arrived in full force. However, experts warn that the numbers should be interpreted with caution, considering the abnormal increase in imports that occurred in previous months in anticipation of the tariffs. Since resuming office in January 2025, Donald Trump has been pushing a strongly nationalist economic agenda, promoting across-the-board increases in tariffs on foreign goods. He imposed specific duties on steel, aluminum, and automobiles, in addition to a standard tariff of 10% on most imported goods, affecting several countries. Trump initially went as far as to apply even higher tariffs to certain countries, but ended up temporarily suspending these measures for 90 days, giving a chance for diplomatic negotiations. The clock is now ticking, as that deadline expires next month. And behind the scenes in Washington there is a buzz of activity to strike deals before time runs out. During a recent telephone conversation with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Trump sought a breakthrough in trade negotiations. The climate, however, remains tense. The truce between the world's two largest economies is teetering on a tightrope. On his social media account, Trump declared that it was a very productive call, with the main focus on trade. Teams from both countries are reportedly preparing for a new meeting in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, Chinese state media reported that there was an agreement to continue talks, as well as an official invitation for Trump to visit the country soon. Despite the diplomatic gestures, the reality is that the tariffs applied by the United States have increased the average effective tax burden on imports to the highest level since the 1930s, the height of the Great Depression. The current situation brings with it a series of economic consequences. After a start to the year with accelerated imports, the sudden impact of the tariffs caused a sharp halt in trade. Companies are now faced with the challenge of reassessing their business models, suppliers, and even the prices they charge consumers. In directly affected countries, the effects are already painful. In Mexico, for example, the steel industry reported that its exports to the United States were reduced by half in April. In Canada, the national trade deficit reached the highest level in history, hitting 7.1 billion Canadian dollars, driven by 3 consecutive months of declining exports to the United States. The U.S. Commerce Department report released on Thursday shows that, almost no product category escaped the impacts. Imports of passenger cars, for example, fell by around 1/3 from March to April. Pharmaceuticals were also affected, as were popular consumer goods, including cell phones, furniture, toys, artwork, and clothing. Interestingly, some countries have actually seen an increase in exports to the U.S., such as Vietnam and Taiwan. This happened because after an initial threat of increased tariffs, Trump temporarily suspended trade sanctions against those markets. The loophole left room for American companies to turn to alternative suppliers outside their primary targets. Despite the steep drop in imports in April, cumulative data for 2025 still shows growth. In the first 4 months of the year, the U.S. imported about 20% more than in the same period in 2024. Exports increased approximately 5% year over year. The total trade deficit, which includes both goods and services, also suffered a significant decline. dropping from $138.3 billion in March to $61.6 billion in April. A pretty drastic reduction that signals the immediate effects of the tariff policy, but, experts warn that this so-called numerical victory may actually mask deeper negative effects like disorganization in logistics chains, product shortages, and inflation in consumer prices. Trump defends his strategy, arguing that tariffs are essential to protect American industry, revitalize abandoned factories, and restore jobs lost to globalization. "We are bringing manufacturing back home," he said in a recent speech. "What used to be made in China will now be made in the United States." But not everyone shares this optimistic view. Many economists warn that these measures could have the opposite effect in the long run, hurting economic growth, raising costs for consumers, and making it harder for the United States to integrate into global supply chains. In addition, there is a real risk of trade retaliation, which could trigger a new tariff war between global powers. Business people in various sectors are already reporting increases in production cost, difficulties in sourcing parts and raw materials, and delays in the delivery of imported goods. For many, the problem is not just the cost but the uncertainty. Will new tariffs be imposed? Will they be suspended? And what will happen to trade relations with allied countries? The climate of instability also affects the mood of the financial market. Stock markets have shown signs of volatility since Trump reactivated his tariff agenda. Investors are trying to anticipate the impact of the measures and protect themselves from the political unpredictability dominating Washington. Meanwhile, diplomats are racing against time to prevent the trade dispute from turning into a major crisis. The mission now is to avoid an even greater escalation in international tensions, which could jeopardize not only global trade but also geopolitical stability in several regions of the world. There is a concerted effort to forge provisional agreements, calm tensions, and ensure that United States strategic interests are defended without completely sacrificing its historic alliances and multilateral commitments. Washington seeks to preserve its image as a global leader, while Beijing maintains a firm and cautious stance, without failing to respond to provocations. The next round of negotiations is scheduled for the coming days and is expected to be, pretty decisive. The entire world will be watching every signal, every gesture, and every word that comes out of the White House or Beijing. After all, the future of the global economy may be redrawn in real time, with tariffs being applied and revised, public threats made on social media, and last-minute phone calls trying to avoid collapse. Analysts predict that any slip-up in the talks could trigger chain reactions, stock market crashes, currency devaluations, product shortages, and even technical recession in countries that are highly dependent on foreign trade. Whether Trump's plan will work or not is still too early to say for sure. But one thing is clear, the immediate impact is visible and honestly pretty profound. The repercussions are affecting ports, which are seeing a reduction in the volume of goods, factories, which are facing shortages of inputs and rising costs, financial markets, which fluctuate with each new headline, and American households, where the price of everyday items is starting to rise. The climate is uncertain, and, many business people are halting investments until there is a clearer outcome. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens are beginning to feel in their wallets the effects of a trade war that initially seemed to be just a matter of foreign policy.